Coming up next on Landscapes Through Time, David Dunlop follows in the steps of the Hudson River painters to explore the majestic Kaaterskill Falls.
I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter. Welcome to the Catskills. This is where American art history happens. Thomas Cole comes here in 1825. That's when Hudson River School painting begins. I'm at the top of Kaaterskill Falls. There's a 180-foot drop right below me. Very majestic, sublime, and picturesque. That's what the Hudson River painters would look for. The romantic spirit of the age demanded it. I'm going to set up my easel, and so are my students, right here where they set up theirs, seeing if we can try some of their ideas and their techniques right where they did. But let me take you back to 1825 to understand what it was like here. Interestingly, it looked just like this. You'd see the same view, verdant forests, limitless abundance, sense of wilderness, a spiritual icon for a new nation. We had just recently doubled the size of the country with the Louisiana Purchase a generation before. This was a new country with a new vision, a sense of itself, a sense of pride, a sense of destiny, hope, and promise. And this vast tract, these vast landscapes that the Hudson River painters would describe, they held that promise of limitless abundance. Cole had one student, Frederick Church, and he lived in this Hudson Valley not far from here too. So did Sanford Gifford. He was born in Hudson, just across the river from the Cole house. There are other Hudson River painters. Asher Durand, he'll paint scenes like this up the Glen. Worthington Whitridge, Albert Bierstadt, Thomas Moran. There's a great group of them. They're not a particular school. They're a sort of loose affiliation of friends with some common interests in describing this magnificent landscape. Thomas Cole, like all of the others, will go to Europe. Thomas Cole himself was an immigrant. He'd come over to the United States like the massive immigration underway in 1825. 13 million people in the United States then. And in one generation by 1850, there'd be 25 million. So Thomas Cole is one of those immigrants. He has this new sense of hope for a new country. And he's bringing with him some of these European ideas for picture making. Ideas of the ideal landscape, the traditions of the great landscape painters, Claude of Lorraine and Poussin. But Cole brings something else as well. He says you have to walk in nature as if you were a poet. And it's this interpretation of nature, with an ambition to elevate, with moral purpose, that Cole brings to painting. He brings a spontaneity, a drama, as a part of the romantic tradition from Europe. The 1800s were the century for landscape painting. An interest in the new sciences, geology, meteorology, and later, psychology. The Hudson River painters had studied the geology of the rocks, the floor of the trees, the topography, to learn how to paint and accurately describe it. After Cole, they were scientist painters, explorer painters, not just poets. Still, they had the heightened sense of color and drama of nature. Some of the Hudson River painters would join the U.S. Geological Survey teams and travel west to map and to create the vision of the beautiful United States. It was a country hungry for this vision. Innes, Moran, Whitridge, Bierstadt, they worked for the railroads, those railroads who wanted to encourage Western settlement. The second generation Hudson River painters, painting in the second half of the 1800s, were called the Luminous. Somebody like Sanford Gifford or George Innes or Frederick Kensit. And thereafter, some sublime poetry that they're going to feel and imbue this landscape. They're interested in the luxurious, luminous light and infinite spirituality that's here. And it's this love of landscape and its appreciation of its spiritual capacity to inspire, as well as their simultaneous interest in science and geology, that would make the Hudson River School something that was truly indigenous and the first visual identity for American painting. Now I've got the easel right at the edge of the falls. You can hear that water tumbling those 180 feet. It's right here that Asher Durand, Cole, Gifford set up their easels, and that's what we're doing. Now the first thing they do is a series of sketches. First, just what's called a croquis, a quick liming in. This is that dark territory and the water moving out and over. They still are married to a tradition, and that tradition is the ideal landscape tradition from Europe of having a drawing and a composition. Thomas Cole, he even tells Asher Durand, don't paint, first draw. Draw carefully. It teaches you observation skills. As an engraver, he was interested in drawing. Now I'm ready to try some of that rubbing in of the transparent red oxide of a burnt sienna or an umber. And for Gifford, who does this luminous light, he'll first put out that transparent red oxide or a burnt sienna. I'm going to take some paper toweling and a little medium, which is linseed oil principally, and a little bit of turp in it. And I'll rub that into my scene. It's going to help give a unified light as well as support the neutralizing atmospheric perspective that I'm going to work on in a bit. Now, he rubs it in until it starts to really come off, and it appears to get lighter and lighter as he rubs it. And it goes a little yellow as we rub it in. And the ghost of the drawing starts to show up. If I want to take off more, as he does, I'll go straight in and remove more with a little more medium. Gifford will do an interesting thing. He'll outline some of this in a white chalk, especially along the horizon. Imagine it's 1863 and you're right on the clove with Gifford in the autumn. This is Gifford's moment. Now I'm ready to block in with additional colors. I'm going to take the opposite, a blue, and when I mix them together, we're going to get a nice neutral gray. And the more blue I put in, the more neutral, until I end up with a grayed rock tone that's very close. Here we go. I'm blocking in the large territory, coming across, do something over here and here. Now I'll use a little white and I'll put out some more colors. Here's the white, rose madder, evening blue light. Vermilion, he did not have a cadmium red, and a yellow. He said use a chrome yellow. That was a new color. Now I can make a couple of different kinds of greens, and if I want to dull that green, I'll add some of that white. This has to be a deep blue, which I'm going to pull out later, so let's get that in here right now, where the water is going to flow down. All the Hudson River painters, Durand, Church, sculpt their shapes with their brushes. Now I'll go back and we'll add some more of that white and mute the colors. The more colors you mix, the less light comes back to the eye and they get very chalky. Our Hudson River painters did not have chalky paintings. They're using transparent colors, or if they're using an opaque color, they're not mixing it with too many others. It'll go chalky. These colors in the distance are so washed out relative to this. The contrast level is very high. That's what makes the frame. That idea may have come from Venetian stage set paintings, and this is sort of the curtain that is pulled back. And remember, our Hudson River painters go to Rome, go to Venice, and learn those principles, the principles of Titian, the principles of Da Vinci. I'm killing the colors with all that white. And I'm testing it here to see how it's going to look when I get it up here. And you can see how that red oxide, that red brown underneath, acts to blend and affect the colors. The brush is trying to suggest the shapes and direction and the current of those trees. He works from the horizon down. That's a very traditional idea. Rembrandt will work from the back to the front. This system, which is actually a French system as well. Valenciennes, who would teach Michelin, who would teach Corot, who would inspire the Barbizon painters, Francois Millet, he meets with Sanford Gifford when they're together in Barbizon, France, and shows him some of these principles. I'm going to pull this up so my brush can get in here. This is like a cartoon show. All right, well, hold it. We'll go for you and a lot of you. More color as I go up into the sky and blend down. And I'll lift some of this color off so that I can have a lot of light right at that horizon. And a soft edge, a soft blended edge. That's Da Vinci's sfumato technique. They're aware of those techniques. It's an Italian technique for getting more volume. Now I'm going to come in and peel out some of the light and start doing that blending. This is that light that passes through the paint film, bounces off the light ground, gives it a little warmth. Because right on that edge of that horizon, you'll see there's a sort of pink glow. And that bright against that dark edge, a fluting effect, something that happens in your eyes more than it happens in nature. That's a perceptual thing that happens inside your cones as they become stressed looking at one bright color. And controlling values was something Sanford Gifford does better than almost anyone I can think of, which is what gives his painting so much luminosity. That is matching a color to a value. For them, this was called the distant visual goal. That's to give a sense of immeasurable space, because the classic definition of a landscape, and this is something they're very conscious of, is that a landscape painting is a window on deep space. Since Roman times, since Turner at the Royal Academy. Now I'm going to go here, get that value right, very washed out, very grayed, a little pink into that, very neutral. Flood of the edge, soft, ragged edge gives some more volume. Right on this edge, it's always a dark against light, a light against dark. Landscape paintings, Hudson River paintings are held together with contrast. Contrast in design, contrast with diagonals, contrast with the shapes. Now I'll do some more of this atmospheric perspective working on the other side of the color wheel with the violets. This is Sanford Gifford. That's the Kaaterskill clove. It's yellow and violet gray. And this violet shadow creates a crevice back in here. And in the study stage, this is not the finished picture stage, they're plein air painting all of the fine tuning, all of the finish, and finish is very important to them, ends up in the studio, not in the field. Complementary colors are making one color sink behind or propel the other color farther forward or not. Now I'm turning my brush and moving it in a vertical fashion to sculpt the sense, the verticality of the trees on the hillside. I'm creating something that's a little misty and smoky, as Gifford liked to do, by removing some of this paint. And take that and make an autumnal orange. This was their favorite season to paint, I must tell you. Autumn. In fact, Jasper Cropsey, another of the Hudson River painters, preferred this season. They had a hard time persuading Europeans that paintings like Cropsey's autumn scenes could be true. They seemed too inflated, too surreal. You see how these subtle variations in color saturation, they're blended, there's no edges. It's a dissolution. It's painting vapor, painting the air. Ruskin called it painting with dust, to make sure there were no edges so that you could get a luminous appearance. Sanford Gifford, such a loner, his friend Worthington Whitridge and Bierstadt were very cross with him one day when they're out there with this Denver expedition, and he heads off on his own for 2 months. Whitridge says, "Where is he? We've lost him for sure." And then one evening, on a horse across the range, the lone figure, Sanford Gifford, strolls into camp. Now I'm going to go back here to the back. See, I'm ignoring this for a while, and then we'll do some things with the water. Nuances of color inside of that distance, and right on the edge, a little fluting. That is that it's a little lighter here than it is at the top. See how my brush is working its way and slowly that mist is coming through here? Now let's come up here to the water and play with some of the striations in the rock. They were geologists, especially someone like Church and Durand. They had a library of science. Their libraries were not aesthetic or artistic libraries, they were scientific libraries. So they'd noticed that this is a sedimentary rock. See it in its layers? It's not a volcanic rock, it's a sedimentary rock. And so their descriptions of it in the paint and their contours and their marks would reinforce that. These are where I want my sharpest contrast because the sharp edges happen nearer to you. Right now I'm going to cut in, and over here we'll just tighten up some edges, something they like to do. Top of the rock catching some light. Let's catch some rocks in here. I'm just deleting some of the paint to create some sense of the striations of the rock as they fall down to the water. And I'm adding light, but it's subtracting paint. Get some deeper shadows underneath this rock. Now it's a little bit of the water. Which is moving this way. Turbulent water. Catching more light. Water gives you that sense of movement. Take the viewer into the picture. Now I'm adding a little bit of opaque paint. Oop. Rush. We want it to rush in. I'm going to give a little bit of foliage over here. See the power of contrast to throw that rock forward? Now I've gone about as far as someone would go with this preliminary study. Then they would take it back to their camp, the hotel, the studio, and either continue it into a more finished state with the glazes, for example, or enlarge it and just use it as something, as a study for expansion into something bigger and then bigger again. Kensett, for example, will finish a group of these, put them around his studio, and buyers will come to the studio and say, I'd like that one maybe 3 by 5 feet. Sort of like ordering from a catalog. I'll take off the tape and go see how one of my students, Loretta, is doing, who's doing an Asher Durand study. As I take the tape off, I'm reminded of how the Hudson River School began, when 3 New York painters, who were not at that time particularly known as landscape painters, John Trumbull, William Dunlop, and Asher Durand, are walking on the New York City streets and spy a painting that they find inspiration. It's a landscape painting of these Catskills by Thomas Cole. And really at that moment, we can mythically say the Hudson River School of Painting in 1825 begins. Oh, Loretta, this looks like Asher Durand has been here, but I know it was you.
Thank you, David. However, I'm having great difficulty with the color.
Let's put some in.
All right.
As a contrast to the red-brown, we'll put some blue and we'll make the motion. Rather than just be a fog here, let's do the steps and then we'll pull it out.
Well, that's better already.
And we'll go a little bluer and greener when I get down here. A little deeper as it gets closer to me. Go to your ultramarine blue. This is your savoring blue light and a little of your gamboge. Makes that rock pop a little bit there. I love this composition right here, snaking up through here. And this idea of a little intimate glen, Asher Durand thought that was a splendid idea. He paints in this glen. And he wants something that feels intimate so that when he's back in his studio in New York and he looks at this glen, he can have that meditative, beautiful feeling that this is giving us now. I'm going to get a little bit more blue just to introduce some other colors and planes in these rocks. A little more contrast. See how I'll have some be a horizontal rock and some are a vertical rock? Let's play with some of that water.
That's really what worries me the most.
And it's gesture. I'm putting some medium on the brush, and I may try one of these smaller brushes. I think I will. One of these smaller flats. We'll move a little bit more dark blue before we start to lift. Dark blue green right in here.
Oh, I love that color.
So that gives us more to play with if there's a little more contrast. The turbulence of the water. Before we can find that turbulence, we have to get enough color underneath it and let it suggest that there are going to be different layers and platforms. So it's a smaller platform up here and a little broader platform below. It expands as it comes to us. See how it makes the area seem like it's coming to us? If each one gets bigger as we tear down, and I'll do one more right in here. Now we can start to think about the water itself. See how much darker it is. I can lift or I can put some paint on. Either way, we could try it either way.
But that works a lot better right there.
Bubbling, a little froth. And see this brush is wiggling too to give that sense of movement in the water. Now I'll try it by putting some white on the brush. It's not pure white. I'm mixing some other color in it, but I want it a little stiff so that the whiskers...
A little drier brush.
Right.
In this case, I think the white adds more dimension to the water.
Seems to a little bit.
Right.
Because the water's in the shadow. We see how we get at this movement. All you want to think about is a gesture with movement. And then we'll bubble it a little bit again. Now the water is feeling more vibrant.
I can see that.
Now we're getting some real movement.
Right.
And a few richer darks with the blue. Light against a dark. See how it helps separate the rocks? We can kind of mist up the background. Let's take some of this. We're going back into a mist.
I think that's terrific.
And I'll rub this down. And you decide how gray or how risky you want to be. We can neutralize this more. It's a mystery because it helps bring the glen forward where we're standing. If it were 1855, there was a big hotel right here.
Oh, how
And
wonderful.
Gifford stayed there, Whitridge, all Hudson River painters stayed in that hotel. They were successful then, they could afford to stay there. But for the tourists, and for a fee, the base of those falls, they'd gather the tourists from the hotels. The Mountain House Hotel, the Laurel House Hotel. And there's a dam right up this stream.
Oh, how wonderful.
They would hold back the water and then lift the gate, and a torrent would come down this creek to make a massive waterfall over there for the delight of all the spectators. This is before the Civil War. It was sort of a Disney World even then. I'm going to increase the darks up here too, and a little bit in here. Let's try some of those trees back there. And the value is really close. And they work out of the darkness just to give you an idea. And you see how I'm building up a kind of letter A? Now, when you do your darker trees up here, they'll overlap those trees and we'll have a stronger sense of contrast.
Oh, thank you, David.
Oh, are you kidding? You're doing a great job. This is so much fun to play with.
Oh, thank you.
This place, this mountainside in the Catskills, holds many memories, many ghosts. Rip Van Winkle slept here for 20 years. James Fenimore Cooper's leather stocking, his adventures were in these mountains. And the Hudson River painters, they began their journey here too, in the valley of the Hudson River. The Mountain House was right over here. And the Mountain House was built in 1825. Right here, there were parties for New York's rich and famous. It's all gone. It's just memories. Lost shadows. But for the Hudson River painters, there's something still living, a presence still to be felt. Because we can look at their paintings and feel the inspiration, a cascade and a current of ideas stimulated by a great American landscape. And this landscape can make a poet out of any painter. I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter.
On the next Landscapes Through Time, artist David Dunlop follows the path of the American Impressionist to the Lieutenant River in Old Lyme, Connecticut.